I feel like Sunday school is such a traditional term.
How serious are your people about life groups?
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Struggles We Grow From podcast. If you're new around here, welcome. We are Austin and Sydney Prince. And yeah, thank you for joining us today. In the last episode, we were talking about what was God's purpose for the church. And so if you're just joining us for the first time and this is your first podcast ever, I would highly recommend going back and listening to that episode before you go into this episode, because we're kind of continuing the conversation a little bit. So
we'll probably talk about this for a little while because you brought up a lot of things.
Yeah. So yeah, we're excited about this.
So how can hold up before we go into it? How can people stay connected with the Struggles We Grow From podcast?
I feel like we're at church right now, and you're like, I don't know.
Well, this is basically what Sunday mornings look like for me.
So if you don't know, Austin is a pastor, and currently his role is the online experience pastor at our current church. And but before that, he was an in-person, like, interim location pastor for a season, and then stepped into this role because COVID kind of changed the game with church and online.
Yeah.
And I mean, he'll be the first one to tell you that he wants people to be in person at a local church. Like, he doesn't just want people to watch online.
Yeah.
But it's definitely like an on-ramp. But it is cool. Like, we have people, that watch in different countries and all over the U.S. And so, yeah. But anyway, that's what he means when he says that.
Yeah,
if
we
you
should
don't
do
know.
a podcast on online church.
Oh, gosh.
That's what I want.
A lot of people have a lot of opinions about that.
I want to give them all of mine.
Okay. Well, okay. So welcome. Yeah. But before we get started, I would love for those of you who are listening, who have been listeners like from the beginning, or listeners that have just been listening to us for a long time. Like, thank you so much for like continuing to listen to us. And the platform that we upload our podcast to, which then distributes to the different places that you listen to, which a lot of you guys primarily listen on Apple Podcasts. That's just pretty cool. Anyway, what our analytics told us. But the more listeners we have, the more things that we can do with our podcast.
Yeah.
Because we would love to make this something that does support us a little financially. And so if you could share this with like friends that you think that would enjoy it, or family, like the more listeners we have, the more that helps us. So share this, send it to someone in a text message. Like right now, it's so easy. If you're on Apple Podcasts, there is like some dots. You just hit share, send it. Just send it to...
No context, just send it.
all the peoples. Okay, anyway, let's get into it.
Okay. So as we were kind of talking last time, we were, what you were saying, we were talking about, okay, what was the intended purpose for the church? And then I think we started talking about life groups. We started talking about discipleship. We started talking about all those different things. And then I know that you did like a social media poll.
Well, we talked a lot about like churches nowadays just being so heavy on events and feeling like we're event like coordinators.
Yeah.
Instead of like, what was the purpose? And we discovered like the purpose was to spiritually grow. Like, as the leaders, the preachers, the teachers, like their job is to make sure that their congregation is growing spiritually. So is that happening? So then, yes, I did a poll. I mean, it's not like it's some crazy journal that had like hundreds of people do the poll. I was just interested. And like the first question that I asked was...
Let's just start with the first question.
How does your church spiritually like mature like their members of their congregation? And some of my options were like Sunday school, theology classes, life groups, and then I had one section that was like, we don't like we don't really have anything. It's just
Yeah.
Sunday service or whatever. And I think everyone except for one person said that it was life groups.
Yep.
That I think the other person said it's Sunday school, but everyone else said life groups. So that was kind of what we would like. We were saying like we think that the majority of churches today are doing life groups.
Yep.
So yeah.
So let's talk about life groups.
Okay.
So this is
who pioneered and like spearheaded life groups, because like they weren't always a thing. It was
early 2000s, right? So
that's
I
what
late
that's
1990s,
what I would say.
I would probably say. I know one of the big ones was like North Point, North Point was a big groups pusher.
Because they also like they're a church, but then they're one of those churches that like creates books and studies and resources and then sells them.
It's just a business within a church.
Other churches, and so I think they did like. For us, we would say like the church that we're at right now, they kind of spearheaded life groups. I mean, I don't know if they're like the first church to ever do that, but
no. And when I say spearhead, I mean like from the perspective that Sunday school was the main means of discipleship for a lot of churches, and then there was just this drastic shift late 1990s, early 2000s to let's stop doing Sunday school. Let's have them meet during the week.
I feel like Sunday school is such a traditional term. Like, to be like completely honest, like the way, like I'm thinking back to my parents and my Sunday school when I was in high school. It's different when you're young, like you're in elementary, like kindergarten, and it's like you're not really doing things like you're with your friends because you're in your like age group, but it's mostly like the teacher teaching, or there's like some fun little activities you're doing. But for me, like in high school, like that was a life group. It just wasn't the term, like the cool updated terminology. And like when my parents, like they were all, it was married couples from this age to this age, and like they were doing life together because they would do dinners, they would bring breakfast together, and they would meet, they would talk about what they were going through. But it just wasn't coined the term life groups, and it wasn't, the focus was more on what they were studying and less on like growing relationally.
Yep.
But
so like if you don't know what Sunday school is, way to go.
Why?
It's late. I'm just feeling sassy.
That's sorry. For those of you watching on YouTube, yes, my hair is wet. It's not just super greasy. It's so hot, and we went swimming, and the pool, I swear it had like a lot of chemicals. Like that feeling of a lot of chemicals and like your skin is burning.
I just think it was like 87 degrees, so it didn't feel like...
It kind of felt like a bath.
Yeah, it felt like we were just sitting in bath water for a long time.
But anyway, my skin was burning. I had to take a shower.
Anyways,
and here we are.
So like, I think it's important as we talk to just hit Sunday school. Like, what is Sunday school? Why is it important? How did it start? And the truth is, Sunday school was started by churches to help teach children like math and reading and language arts.
Well, it was the children who, like, long ago, families needed their kids to stay at home to work, to provide for the family, like to provide money. So they weren't being educated. And this was a place where they could get educated.
Yeah.
So it was school on a Sunday.
Yeah, it was literally school on a Sunday.
Because that was their day of not working.
Yeah, it was mostly driven out through churches, and it was a missional environment, right? But how Sunday school started versus how Sunday school is now is starkly different. They wouldn't when Sunday school was started at its invention, at its core, it was designed to be an outlet to educate children who were uneducated. They wouldn't have had a class of 65-year-old ladies bickering about who's got the best macaroni salad.
Listen, it's so funny, like thinking back, the Baptist church I grew up in, each Sunday school class, like, you know, had their own designated room, and you would call it like the education building, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And they would have their own designated room, but some of the like the older men groups and the older women groups, that group was a group for so long that they literally had a certain name for their group, named after someone who had like passed away, who had like started the group, and a plaque of that person's name on the outside of their room. Like that was their room. Like it was a very like, it was like a big thing.
I pray that person had great kingdom impact. And that's the reason why.
Hopefully. But I think like the main thing that makes any like group a group, or like Sunday school a good group, is the leader.
Mm-hmm.
And how they go about leading it.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's really hard in church, because you find like, okay, it's very few and far between someone's like, I want to sign me up, like, I'm gonna lead, I'm gonna lead the group. You kind of have to, you've got to be led to go find those people. But then once you find those people, it's also very easy to be like, all right, well, here you go,
roll on,
like, do it however you want and do it. And then the issue becomes like they're not leading it well.
Yeah. I mean, there are people listening to us right now that I've straight up been like, I need you to lead a group. Number one, I'm sorry. Number two, I'm not sorry. So it's a sorry, not sorry scenario.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, I think it does come down to the leader. And I think, man, I think there are wins with Sunday school. I think there are wins with life groups. I think the wins can be the same and they can be different. And I ultimately think, like, it does come down to the leader. And it comes down to how serious is your church? How serious are your people about life groups? Because life groups were literally the way that they were sold is the wrong word, but the way that they were kind of explained, and they are still explained by hundreds and thousands of churches, is this is what the early church would have looked like, living relationally, life on life with people.
Well, I don't think even that's not really said. You know, like what's really said is like, to grow spiritually, you have to grow I think everyone uses that because I think like it's like a North Point phrase, and there's so many churches, like, not that it's bad, but so many churches use North Point group resources. Yeah, I mean, not just life groups, but you know, the other groups, like groups for those, like, you know, going through like divorce care and starting point and like all the different groups environments that we like use all those resources. So that divorce terminology.
Divorce care would be a different group. But again, like, this is not like a bash North Point thing.
No. I'm just saying, like, we all say that, like, to grow spiritually, you've got to connect relationally with people. Sign up for a group today.
Yeah. I mean.
So I think what we think is, from that statement, and like we know firsthand because we've led a lot of life groups.
Hold on. I feel like we're jumping ahead because that's like how it's being used now. But when it was started, when life groups were started in the late 90s, early 2000s. Oh, so you're going back.
Yeah.
It was designed to look more like what the church looked like in the book of Acts, where it was people gathering in homes, breaking bread, living relationally like that. Like, that's how it was designed. And that is still, that's still doable 100%. But I do feel like, I mean, you see it more than I do. Like, I only have a few friends that are in ministry still, and most of them are at traditional churches. But you see all the, hey, you see the things, the catchphrases being replicated over and over again. And I mean, I say the catchphrases when it's time for group link, when it's time to sign up for groups, when we're doing short-term groups, when we're doing 40 days groups, when we're doing fall short-term, like that's what we say because it's true. It's just a extremely saturated phrase where I think even though it's true and it's right, people oftentimes have heard it so much that they just clock out, right?
Yeah.
They just tune out. So,
or people have also had like negative experience in a group, which makes them not want to do it again, whether it be the leader
and you shared our
or
weird
the
life group experience,
awkwardness,
didn't you?
Yeah, we've had some other awkward group times that could have like past that could have just been like, yeah, we're never doing this again.
Where there were some where we have shown up to life groups and
Yeah.
we've shown up to gatherings. We were there 15 minutes
Pre-ministry. Like before we
pre-ministry
stepped into, yeah.
when we were church shopping, which we'll probably talk about that too. But how wrong we were at what the local church is and how
Yeah.
anyways, when we were church shopping, there were so many life group gatherings that we went to, and immediately within 15 minutes, we're like, nope.
See y'all later.
Literally, we were at one, and it was like a chaos bomb went off.
Yes, I remember that.
And I remember looking at her, and she's looking at me, and she's giving me these eyes like,
I'm ready to go.
like I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
And we literally looked at each other and we were like, maybe life groups aren't for us. Like we've been there.
But the thing is it's not really explained what to expect and also like what's expected of you.
Yeah.
If you're joining a group, you're coming to it with some kind of expectation.
Yep.
Either you've made it up in your head, or somebody's told you something, or you've had a previous life group experience and
Yeah.
you're joining a you've got some kind of expectation. The leader has an expectation, and the staff and leadership at your church have an expectation. And if that's, I mean, we talk about in marriage, like we go in, whether it be a vacation or a trip or how to parent or this and that, both of us have expectations.
Yep.
And if we don't communicate what our expectations are, and we're not on the same like level, we're not on the same page,
Yeah.
we're both going to be mad at each other because your expectation is different than mine. So I think what churches need, I mean, like, who am I, whatever, but like, I think what would be really beneficial is when it's time to sign up for groups, once people have signed up for groups, obviously the leaders need to have training. They need to have training 100%. But I think everyone that has signed up for a group, leaders and group members, as a church, they're all in the same place, all in the same room. And we're talking about like what to expect, the heart behind groups, and diving more into like what you're saying. Because we have led a lot of groups as leaders. And there's often times where you've got people in the group that just don't take it, like it's not taken seriously.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we get to the part of what is your church's strategy? Sounds like a bad word.
No, strategies.
Strategy.
We talked about strategies are important.
Plan, system for spiritual maturity and spiritual growth.
Yeah.
And that was another poll that I did after the first question. The second question was, okay, like basically all of y'all said your church does life groups. Okay. So if life groups is the way that your church is growing people into maturity, and I explained like what I meant by maturity on like the story, but the majority, the highest percentage was on a thing that said, we have a lot of new people. And the other ones were, our church has many mature believers. our church has few mature believers. We've got a lot of new people.
Yeah.
Which, in saying that, is like we get a lot of new people, but we don't see a lot of those new people staying and then growing in maturity.
Yeah.
And that's an issue.
Yeah. I think that's more connected to like the consumerism of modern church, or the way that people approach modern church. I don't think the issue necessarily is all the churches or church in general. I think people have a very consumer mentality when it comes to church. So they love showing up to a experience. They hate actually applying what Scripture tells them to apply. But that's a different podcast for a different time. But, life group is a viable way to grow deep, mature as a believer. But it really does come down to, is your leader good?
Yeah.
And are you...
And when we say, like, is your leader good, we're not meaning that, like, the leader has to
be on staff and know every book of the Bible.
Know every book of the Bible and know exactly what it says, and that you should be able to answer every single theological question that someone asks.
You should know things about the book of Enoch. You know.
No, like, that's not...
That was a total joke, by the way.
Yeah.
That's just...
It just got brought up in our life group.
Literally yesterday.
But... yeah, so I think there's so much into leading a life group. And I think our favorite time leading a life group was, sorry if you can hear our puppy, she's playing with her toy. But our favorite time leading a life group was in the middle of 2020. COVID happens.
No, it was 2021.
And we were
Oh no, it started.
Okay.
Yeah. It started in 2020.
Our very first life group meeting in this particular group was the week before the COVID shutdown. So we met, and then the next week we couldn't meet. We met in person.
Yeah.
And then we couldn't meet in person, and it switched to virtual.
Oh, yeah.
But why I say that was my favorite time is the location that we were at the time, the couple who was leading the life group leaders, which that's vital to have.
Yeah.
Is the person who was leading the life group leaders, after every single time we met with our group, the life group leaders met.
Yeah.
And we got to talk and we got to share, like, what's, how is, like, your group going? Like, what questions do you have? Like, what is something that we can help you with? Like, how do you see God moving in your group?
Yeah.
Like, what's something awesome that's happening? Like, what are you seeing? And, like, that was so needed and so good, because as a leader, like, number one, you need that accountability. Number two, like, leaders, and I've shared this, like, they don't need to feel like they're, okay, like, thank you for signing up to volunteer to lead this group. Now you're on your own. Yeah. Have a great job. And guess what? Your return rate is crap. Like, they're not going to return, because when you involve people, when you involve people and you are doing life with other people, stuff's going to happen. Either somebody's getting a divorce, there was something that happened, somebody's mad at somebody in the group, you said something that they don't agree with, theologically, and you got it, I mean, we've had it. We've had it. But when you have a leader who you haven't equipped well, and they're stepping into that, or do you know if your leader agrees and affirms, like, everything that your church believes? What if something's going on in the church and they have a question about it? Is your leader equipped to know how to navigate that conversation, or where to point them to, or to say, well, this isn't really a time to talk about that. Like, I would love to get you connected with someone at church that can answer that question. Like, whatever it is, you have to equip them well.
Jeez.
Sorry, that was a lot.
I mean,
And then on the flip side, people that are a part of the group
just my advice. Here we go. This is my advice.
need to be serious about it.
Don't be a turd.
Who are you talking to?
Anyone that's a part of a life group, and they're
What do you mean a turd?
like
what's an example of someone being like? What do you mean?
and they're. Gosh, we've been in so many life groups, but I think like when I say turd, I mean somebody that just shows up to like
Fill a seat.
fill a seat and suck the air out of the room and suck the life out of the group.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think people do that maliciously by any means, but that's what happens when you like don't take life groups seriously.
Or there's the cases which we've done like all groups with married couples. So I think for
Jeez.
singles it would have to be different, but like for like couples, we see a lot of times the wife has dragged the husband and they do not want to be there. They do not want to like engage in conversation. Or, you know, if we say like how we do our life group is like we go through a book of the Bible. We check it out verse by verse and we study it and we talk about it. Because that's what we believe. If you're saying that life groups is where people grow spiritually, that's how you do it.
Yep.
And you know, like you can show up to group and like not have read the section that you know we were all reading together. And you know, I mean sometimes that happens. Sometimes you get a busy week.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of this, when we're talking about if this is the way your church is growing people
we ain't
into
talking
maturity,
about the turds.
well, hold on to the turds. We'll come back to the turds. I don't really like saying that. Okay, anyway. What is the leader having the group go through to study? That is another. I have heard over the years, like people that I've known personally that have been single, so they're in like a all women's group,
Or a men's group.
or a men's group,
Or a young adults group.
or young adults, whatever. There have been some cases where, and I think all churches, like some churches are very like, this is the book that we want you to go through as groups, and this is what, or you've got to talk about the sermon from the weekend, like you got to dive into it more and talk about that. Like some churches are like, this is what, and you don't have an option to choose what you want to do. And then some churches are like, as a leader, you've got free reign, like do whatever study you want, like whatever you want. But you know, I think the danger in both of those is what is it that you're having your people study, or the flip is if it's just free reign, what is it that we're studying? Because I've been in groups before in the past where I feel like the study wasn't growing me in maturity in scripture and in God's word. It was like topical.
Yeah.
And then it turns into a lot of like, well, this is how I feel about this, and like our feelings. And especially for like when I've been in like a women's group in the past, like it can get to a lot of just like how we feel about things, not, well, this is like this is this and whatever, you know. Or you've got people that are steering the conversation like into left field because it gets topical.
So what are you asking? Are you asking what's my point of view on that?
Yeah, like because I think we talked about if groups are going to be successful in growing your people in spiritual maturity, number one, it's the leader.
Yep.
Are they well equipped? Number two, it's what are they studying?
Yeah.
So do you think it should be like free reign, like you as a leader, you get to choose whatever you feel, you know, or help your group help you choose what you're studying, or or like the church has certain choices and options, or like what?
This is all my personal opinion.
Yeah.
I can't be liable for anything said and not said.
Sure.
What
is somebody going to do?
I don't know. Listen, my personal opinion, literally, here it is. my personal opinion when it comes to groups material, gosh, I am a big proponent. My personal preference is curating resources and studies for people to do, for groups to do, and then saying, these are the studies that you can do. And if there's something that you want to do on the outside of this, check with a pastor, check with whoever is over groups. Check before you do it. Because there's danger. There's danger in just letting, groups do whatever they want. Paul spends most of the New Testament talking and fighting for unity, that you would be in one accord and in one gospel and in one mind. And if a group leader in your church is taking everybody through a Joyce Meyer study, that's not of one spirit. That's not of one accord. That is not one
Yeah.
That's not.
Yeah, I know.
It's wrong.
I mean, just because you have to be careful, because just because a book says the word devotional on it doesn't mean that it's good at all.
Don't. If your study talks about energies,
Manifestations,
good things, prosperity gospel.
Yeah.
If it talks about tolerance, run.
Yeah.
That's not God.
Yeah.
If you come to me and you talk about grounding because you found it in a devotional study, you better watch out, because I'll get the crowds and the pitchforks. We ain't doing none of that around these parts.
Oh,
try that in a small town.
Oh gosh.
Sorry, I got fired up.
You're fine.
So yeah, I think like having a preset of studies to do is super important.
Yeah.
My personal preference.
Yeah.
Right? That's again my personal preference. Every person who at every church is different. I know some, they free reign.
Yeah.
All across the board. I know some that are even stricter than, here's a couple resources or here's 20. They're like, here's one, and you're going to do this.
Yeah.
I
really just love studies that just take you through a book of the Bible.
And people are so scared to do that because, we have conversations with people all the time. Like, well, I don't know the Bible like you do, or how do I get to that point? Honestly, and all you need is a commentary. You need a good, solid commentary.
Mm-hmm.
And you can go to ChatGPT and you can ask it, give me 5 life group questions about Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 through 25.
And so many churches now have Right Now Media, and they give it to their congregation for free. And Right Now Media has some things that I might go, but a majority of it is good. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of studies on there for a life group leader to take you through a book of the Bible. We've done one, and they do have a short video that sets up your discussion. It's very short, but the group should be doing the reading on their own before they show up, throughout the week. And then you show up, you can watch the short video, but then it literally has a lot. We've had to skip around questions because there have been so many that there's no way we could have gone through all of those. So for a newer leader, to help equip them with questions, Right
Now Media,
those questions. And I've also found that those questions don't, some of the questions they give, for example, Right Now Media, they're not super duper deep to where you're going to get into something that you're like, oh, I don't, ooh.
Yeah.
But in occasion, you can. We have people in our group that have gone down something that's super deep, and if that's something that you can't answer, you just that's a great question. I would love to study that. Let's study that more.
Or hey, why don't we go have lunch with Pastor whoever
Yeah,
or
like let's
breakfast
go
with
have lunch
Pastor
with
whoever?
Pastor Austin and like let's just see what he has to say.
Next, we're going to talk about aliens.
Do you think do you think the churches that say, all right, life groups is how we grow our people spiritually, do you think that they're currently like working well in that way?
I think that's a hard question to answer because each church has a different flavor of life groups.
Mm-hmm.
Each church has a different goal. I mean, like obviously the goal is for people to be in relationship and grow in their hold on, grow in their maturity, right?
Yeah.
Um, but it just depends, you know. If you feel like your church is all really young people and you don't feel like they're super mature, I'd probably say just, hey, be mindful that your groups aren't turning into feeling sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Because, again, I personally am me personally, this is not me associated with my job or my work. Me personally, I believe in a multi-generational, multi-stage of life group model
Mm-hmm.
because that's what reflects the church, the early church, the most. And I know we've been in life groups where there's nobody seasoned in life there, and it's just young dumb people following and leading young dumb people.
Yeah.
We've been young dumb
The
people
blind
before,
leading the blind.
um, but it's true.
Yeah.
It's really hard to have a successful life group like that, in my opinion, from all of the life groups that we've been a part of. It's
Mm-hmm.
really hard to have a successful life group like that because no one's seasoned in life. Our favorite life groups we've been doing life groups for 10 years,
Yeah.
which is crazy to think about. Our, our favorite life groups have been life groups where there's people who have been seasoned in life
Mm-hmm.
and there's wisdom there, and they don't view themselves as mature believers, right? Or maybe they do, but they're not arrogant, they're not prideful. They're people who have just been through life. And
Yeah.
you know, I hate to say it, but people our age really piss me off. Like they just they just do.
They're very arrogant.
They're very arrogant. I don't feel like they're grounded to reality because we have prolonged adolescence in both male and female, and like no one's willing to stand up and be a woman or stand up and be a man.
Yeah.
But I see like our current life group that we're in. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I'll say them by name, but like Barb and Doug, like they're incredible. I just want to listen to them talk. I know I'm the leader, I don't care. I just want to listen to them talk because they
Yeah.
have wisdom and knowledge and experience and they've been walking with the Lord. Man, Proverbs talks about that's the splendor of a person, right? Because it shows that there's wisdom there, that there's life experience there. So like when it comes down to is life groups working or not, it ultimately comes down to the win of what your church is. If your church win is, hey, we just want people in groups, then it's a win, right? If the goal is we just want people in groups, it's a win. If it's, hey, we want people to become spiritually mature, okay, what's the system and metric to gauge that? Because that's super important. Just having, 7,000 people in groups doesn't determine spiritual maturity, right? So
Yeah.
I think it really comes down to what the win is. But me personally, I think the most effective model is multi-generational, multi-stage of life groups because
And we say that it's not like, oh hey, we're leading like this young adults group, but they've got a leader who's older than them. So like that's different. That's not what we're saying.
no, if
Cuz
there's
you
one
need
old couple and like a bunch of
yeah.
young couples, like that's a form of discipleship.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that that would be what I would lean on for a life group model, because that's more of like an intentional discipleship. Titus 2, old men, old women, young women.
Yeah.
Again, if you're leading a young adults ministry, that I'm not calling you old. I'm so sorry. I'm just saying Titus 2 points to that. But I think like long term, we can talk about young adults ministry. We've experienced young adults ministry. We've seen it succeed. We've seen it fail.
Yeah.
Young adults ministry is just hard. I listen to a lot of different speakers. Prolonged adolescence could also be something that the church is responsible for because of young adult ministries and all these different things.
Yeah.
Not forcing people to leave the nest and go to the next phase of life. Uh, we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, if it's one older couple and a bunch of younger couples, that doesn't work. If it's all old couples, personally, like, I think that's great, but who's getting that wisdom? Like, if you're in that stage of life, if your hair is gray, you should be begging on your knees to the Lord, put young people in my path so I can pass on everything that you've taught me.
Yeah.
And if it's all 30 and 40-year-olds in a life group, I personally, like, I'm not a fan of that. I don't think it works.
Yeah.
Because there's nobody who's past, preteen. There's nobody who's had a kid graduate college or high school. Maybe some, if they're like my parents.
Yeah.
And they got the party started young.
I personally like being a life group leader and looking back. The groups that were my favorite is, like you said, like not being the oldest one in the group. Like, even as a leader, I don't.
Or even being
want.
remotely close in age.
Yeah.
Like, our favorite ones are where there was at least a 15 to 20 year age gap.
Currently, we've got.
We're all over the place.
Yeah, and like it's really, really good because you've got like, us with like the younger kids. You've got a couple with like older teenager. You've got a couple with like kids are out of the nest, and I've got grandkids. And you've got a couple that's like, all of my kids are like grown. They've got kids. We've got like 9 grandkids. Like you've got this.
Yeah.
And it's just really cool to see, like, because even though like we're younger, like people are learning from things that we share, and then we're learning from people that are older than us when they share. And so like it's really cool to see that.
Yeah. And again, like, I'm not bashing. This is not like bash life group models and things like that. It's just asking the question, like, okay.
But it's not bad. I think it's always good for somebody to ask the questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it really, like, is it doing what we think it's doing, or what it's supposed to be doing?
Again, comes down to what you're measuring, what your win is.
Yeah.
But I think from a life group leader perspective, how do I know that my life group is like working or it's doing? Man, our heartbeat as life group leaders right now is we want people to spend time in the Word and to mature. And we've seen that.
Yeah.
Like, we've seen that firsthand. We've seen people who have never read the Bible like this, read the Bible like this, and say, like,
I love this.
Gosh,
yeah.
I did not know that this was in here.
Yeah.
That, for me, I don't care about. I do my own metrics, so I already know that's win. I got to figure out what metric that is. But, like, for me, that's better than any metric, any goal.
Yeah.
Anything that I could think of as, someone who works in the church world is, man, people that I'm sharing my life with are growing in a deeper relationship with Christ. Win.
Yeah.
And if you're a life group leader and that's not happening, and you want that to happen, get help.
Yeah.
Ask your church. Connect with somebody else who's leading a life group. Do something. And if you're somebody who's like, hey, I've been asked to lead a life group and I'm not too sure, do it. If somebody sees something in you enough to say, hey, would you like want to help people grow in their relationship with Christ.
Yeah.
Like, don't look at the things that you don't know, and look at what people see in you, because we've had this story so many times with people. Is like this. We literally say, hey, we think you'd be a great life group leader. Yeah. No, I'm not going to do it. Then a year later, like, this is the best decision I've ever made. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It really does change your life, because it takes the focus, leading a life group, takes the focus off of you. It puts it on everybody else, which is, it's loving your neighbor as yourself, right? And if you're in a life group right now and you just want to like be in a life group, give everything you have and put it into community. Don't hold back, because when you hold back, it's just a cheap knockoff of what Jesus really wants for you.
That was good. Thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode. Please don't forget, we would love to have more listeners listen to our podcast. So go ahead right now, if you haven't already, share this with 1 friend, 2 friends, 5 friends, 10.
Blue friend.
There's an easy share button. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, just give us 5 stars. Please leave us a review. And if you're on Spotify, make sure you're following this podcast so that you are updated when a new episode comes out. And if you are on YouTube, please remember to like and subscribe to our channel. We love you guys so much, and we'll see you back here next time.